and thank you for attending this virtual presentation. My name is Elaine Huber and I will be presenting research findings from a study conducted by myself and Dr. Marina Harvey at Macquarie University. Today I would like to start off by telling you what we discovered from our research. And you can see I've written quite a bold statement on the screen. I would now like to explain why we came to this conclusion. Macquarie University is a typical Australian Metropolitan University with approximately 35,000 students and 2,000 full-time staff. As all universities across the country, we are highly influenced by internationalisation, changes in world economies and the growth in student numbers. And at the same time, as a government-funded institution, we are constantly held accountable for the use of public funding and have quality standard bodies who impose regular reviews. This funding can filter through to academics in the form of research grants, and one such strand covers learning and teaching projects. The internal grants, which tend to be of 12 to 18 months duration, are the subject of our investigations. These projects should have an evaluation component planned into the project life cycle, but we know from experience that this doesn't always eventuate. However, there is no evidence-based research to explain this phenomenon, and hence our study aims to fill this gap in the literature. The three research questions that guided our study can be seen here on this slide. The theoretical framework for the study uses an emergent realism paradigm of inquiry and is described in detail in the paper. This is also known as pragmatism and guides the approach to data collection and analysis. We used a mixed methods approach to collecting data from 15 locally funded learning and teaching projects. Data from project reports and interviews with project leaders were used to conduct a thematic content analysis. Again, please see the full paper for details on these areas. What I'd like to concentrate on in this presentation are our findings. There were a final 4 learning and teaching project evaluation themes that resulted from our coding process: conceptualization, capability building, resources, and approach. Each of these will now be explained in detail. The paper also includes supporting evidence in terms of verbatim quotes, as well as links back to the literature. So our first theme was conceptualization. It was evident from the interviews with project leaders that there was some confusion over what was being evaluated: outcomes, product, program, or process, as well as the purpose of the evaluation. To some, it was simply an exercise in quality assurance and held a negative connotation. Others used evaluation as a means of learning and were more positive in their discussions. Connotations about evaluation may originate from the project leader's own experience of evaluation. They may also arise from the absence of influence and direction when the funding application doesn't specify what or how to evaluate, only that it should be carried out. Participants were unable to differentiate between evaluation, research, and project outcomes. In 10 of the interviews, there were numerous instances where the questions about evaluation were either misinterpreted or misunderstood, and participants' answers focused on the project or the research being conducted. Another area of confusion arose when discussing utility of evaluation findings. Whilst 11 project leaders answered that yes, the evaluation results were usable, only 1 or 2 project leaders were able to clearly articulate how. The level of stakeholder involvement also caused confusion over terminology and also over the importance of making the demarcation between primary and secondary stakeholders. This finding is a concern, as it is unlikely that an evaluation can meet the needs of all stakeholders and should be designed with the correct group in mind. If this is not done, then the evaluation efforts may be misdirected. No project leader was able to name the audience for their evaluations. Identification of the audience for evaluation is crucial at the beginning, so that decisions can be made about what to evaluate and how to report on the evaluation. In locally funded learning and teaching projects, the audience will include the funding body, but it is unlikely that the funding body will also hold a stake in a particular project. This confusion between stakeholders and audiences leads to the inevitable situation where evaluation results are not usable and project leaders become disenfranchised with the purpose of evaluation, stating evidence of disinterest in results. These differing conceptualizations impact the praxis of evaluation. Further investigation into factors that inhibit this relationship between theory and practice is now called for. Our second theme was capability building. One explanation for the confusion around terminology and stakeholder and audience identification could be a conceptual conflation. Because academic teaching staff are highly conversant with the processes and value of evaluation of their own teaching and are able to describe how these results, evaluation results, contribute to the quality assurance and enhancement processes. However, results of our study have indicated a lack of translation of these practices from teaching to a project context. This is confirmed by the responses of the project leaders when asked if their teams had sufficient skills to evaluate the project, with over half of them admitting that they did not. Should academics be expected to be good evaluators? They are expected to have teaching and research skills, but not all academics have the skills to be effective project managers and/or evaluators, and may need to rely on buying in this expertise. If project members are yet to develop evaluation skills, then support is needed to enable them to develop a capacity for project evaluation. A number of participants stated that they would welcome support on project evaluation. Only 3 projects achieved an alignment between having an evaluation plan and having that plan reviewed. Comments from project leaders indicated that lack of alignment was due to lack of time. However, if it was well planned, then evaluation should be incorporated into the project timeline and the review or feedback of the plan, or to indicate to such novice evaluators where and what to look out for to ensure evaluation not only takes place but is effective. Other examples highlighting a lack of understanding of or skills in evaluation were evident from our findings. Only 4 project leaders could name an evaluation framework. From this, we could infer that others didn't know names of frameworks, or perhaps they did not understand the relevance of using one. When discussing evaluation utilization, many participants were unsure of how evaluation results would be used and had not planned for this. However, most project leaders discussed the usability of project results rather than results of any evaluation. Our third theme was around resources. A lack of time to engage with evaluation emerged as a strong theme in this study. It was also present as an overarching factor in a recent critique of the learning and teaching project evaluation literature by the authors of this study. It was found that many of the complex evaluation approaches reported are not suitable to smaller scale projects, or simply there is not enough time available to implement the required measures. This relates to our earlier discussion, as time is required to build capacity in evaluation, but if we are looking at small scale projects, perhaps of only 12 or 18 months, there may not be adequate time to invest in these measures. Evaluation scoping should be taken into account during project planning phase, and it may be this lack of expertise that is the real culprit and not actually lack of time. This planning stage is crucial for the successful completion of the evaluative process. A lack of resources, both financial and human, was repeatedly mentioned. A professional or peer review would have been helpful in terms of offering feedback on the evaluation plan, but participants questioned how this could be funded. A review stage links to the evaluation planning stage, for if this was a requirement, it could be budgeted in the grant application and clearly defined in the scoping stage. And our final theme was about the approach to evaluation. 3 project leaders were able to name the evaluation approach they used: a developmental approach, an action research approach, and a participatory action research approach. Theoretically, the last 2 are research approaches and not specifically evaluation approaches. However, as discussed in our paper, it is fair to assume that the theoretical worldviews or paradigms prevalent in social science research can also be applied to evaluative inquiry. These approaches fit well with the idea of collecting formative evaluation data to inform improvements, as well as the standard summative evaluation data that may serve as an accountability measure. This approach also offers the potential of a good fit within the higher education sector, where action research is commonplace. In some disciplines, it can be applied to evaluation with the benefit of increased learning and development opportunities for all involved parties. The form an evaluation will take influences the role of the stakeholders and study audiences for the project. The role of stakeholder buy-in is well documented in the literature for successful evaluation results and was acknowledged in a number of the project leaders' comments in this study. A developmental approach to evaluation would allow for stakeholder involvement at different stages of the evaluative process and again encourage learning from the project. Another strategy would be to encourage the project leaders to practice critical reflection as part of the evaluation data collection stage and as part of the action research cycle. So how can we use the knowledge gained through these themes that emerge from our study to enable evaluation praxis in locally funded learning and teaching projects? Sustainable and successful approaches to evaluation need to be showcased with the project management community in the sector. We've listened to the voices of the learning and teaching project leaders and drawn on our research findings, and from this have been able to extrapolate and identify a series of strategies for developing capacity across the sector for project evaluation. I will highlight these now. Firstly, we need support, possibly from a centralised unit, and this support needs to include resources and their dissemination on learning and teaching project evaluation. We need more information about evaluation frameworks, including their benefits. We need to allocate time for evaluation in project planning, as well as a provision to revisit a project and assess its impact. Models of how to incorporate evaluation would be useful, and constructive feedback on reports from the university and funding bodies. There needs to be a requirement that makes evaluation and its reporting compulsory, and a support mechanism to help project leaders identify who the stakeholders and study audiences are. And finally, networking opportunities to help disseminate learnings from project evaluations. So in conclusion, we've found that there is a misalignment between evaluation theory and practice of learning and teaching project evaluation in the higher education sector. We found 4 themes evident in the data from the 15 learning and teaching projects that we analysed. And this was conceptualisations, particularly with the overlap between evaluation and research, capability building, resourcing in terms of time and money, and offering an action-oriented approach to evaluation. We conclude that the project leader's perception and conceptualisation of evaluation can inhibit the relationship between this theory and practice. And following our study, we invite colleagues to undertake further investigation into evaluation as it is applied in large-scale learning and teaching projects. We also ask the sector to answer the call made by project leaders of supporting them as project evaluators through the provision of resources, frameworks, models, networking opportunities, and by valuing evaluation by mandating its role in projects and then providing constructive feedback. And we thank you for listening to our presentation today.